Okay, welcome to the Economic Activities Revision PowerPoint for OCR Geography. During this revision session we will look at the types of industry that there are and also the patterns of employment structure. The areas covered overall in this area need to be the ideas of what determines the location of different economic activities. How do multinational companies affect development, which will be covered in a future revision PowerPoint, and how can economic activity affect the physical environment at a variety of scales, including global. So, how can industrial activity be classified? There are several sections that we need to be aware of, and there are many different types of industry, but we can classify them into three main categories, which are primary industries, that include industries that extract raw materials from the earth, like farming, fishing, mining and forestry. Secondary industry, which involves turning a product from a primary industry into another product via the process of manufacturing, i.e. making textiles, furniture, chemicals, steels or car. And also there are tertiary industries. Those are that provide a service. It could be financial services such as banking, nursing, retailing, to something like the police force, transport and also education. Just looking at this table here, could you sort each of the industries out into primary, secondary and tertiary? Car manufacturing would be secondary, retailing would be tertiary, coal mining would be primary, iron and steel industry would be secondary, teaching would be tertiary, farming would be primary, as would fishing, but dentistry would be tertiary. But there is also a fourth sector, which is normally only seen in most economically developed countries, such as the UK, Germany and the USA. These tend to be high technology industries, where scientists and researchers investigate and develop new products, like new mobile phones. Think about the iPhone and how it's changed over the last 3 or 4 years. That would be all through research and development. We could think about things like drugs and how they are researched and developed over a period of time before making their way onto the shop floor. So biotechnology and computer programming are examples of quaternary industry. Industry could be described as a system too. You do have inputs. These can be physical, human or economic. Processes, the things that go on in the factories in most cases, and the output is what comes out the other end. So think of industry as a cake making process. For a company to be profitable, the value of the outputs must be greater than the cost of the inputs. In many ways, the employment structure of countries is seen as an important way to determining whether they are developed or not. So this section may actually be found in one of or both of the sections that you will find in the exam paper. So employment structure is when a country's employment structure shows the percentage of primary, secondary and tertiary industries. It does change over time. Most LEDCs have high numbers in primary, but most MEDCs have high numbers in tertiary, as can be seen from the graph. If we take the pre-industrial time, that is where most LEDCs are at the moment. So most of their workforce is employed in primary industry. Few people work in secondary industry because there's not enough money to invest in the technologies needed for this type of industry. If they can't build factories, they won't be able to process any raw materials that they do have, and often in these poor countries have to sell these primary products for quite low value to most MEDCs who can process them into high quality and highly valuable products. A small percentage of people work in tertiary industry, usually in cities where there are banks, hospitals and schools. They don't tend to have a quaternary industry because the country doesn't have enough educated or skilled workers, again referring back to development, and it can't afford to invest in the technology needed. Most workers in LDCs don't appear in any official statistics because they don't work in jobs that are taxed or monitored by the government too, because they may be having a plot of land which is their family own and they basically produce food for their own family. Many of the jobs also in the informal economy. Think about the number of jobs that might be in these large shanty settlements. Most industrial countries are probably regarded as being newly industrialised countries now, where the employment in secondary industry is increasing rapidly, such as China and also in South Korea. As a country becomes more developed, the percentage of people employed in secondary industry increases. Then it will decrease, as you can see by the second section of the industrial section. This is becoming, it becomes cheaper for businesses to move their factories to LEDCs. It costs more to build factories and pay the workers in MEDCs. And finally, on the right hand side, you can see that post-industrial section. That's where most MEDCs are now. They're categorised by having few people who work in primary industry because machines generally replace the workers, and it's generally cheaper to import primary products from other countries. Farm workers in LDCs earn very little money, so it's easy and cheap to produce the products there. Few people tend to work in second industry now because a lot of those countries that do produce goods are the newly industrialised countries, or NICs. Most people do tend to work in the tertiary sector because there is a skilled and educated workforce, and there's also high demand for the services like in banks and shops. But also you can see emerging that quaternary industry in the bottom right hand corner of the graph. There's some quaternary industry because the country has lots of highly skilled labour and has money to invest in the technology needed, which is going to allow those companies to produce high quality goods to sell in the world economy.